Some memories, when I share them, may forever change how you see me, but I must tell this story, as certain tragedies need to be exposed to light to prevent them from happening again in the future. I want to pause for a moment. If you feel the love and are still listening to my story, please subscribe and hit the like button on the Grandparents Memories channel to show your support. Thank you so much. My name is Martha Williams. At 72 years old, with countless life stories stored in my memory. Many stories are filled with joy, many anecdotes are endearing, but this story, no, it doesn't belong to the beautiful kind. When looking at me, most people only see a small elderly woman with a low hair bun, wrinkled hands, and eyes tinged with weariness. They imagine my life is simply contained in cooking meals for my grandchildren, keeping house, and patiently counting each passing day. How could they know what I've been through to survive until today? As a child, I grew up in rural Maine during the 1970s, a time when life wasn't easy for anyone. My family knew nothing of luxury, not even owning a car. My mother made a living cleaning houses for wealthy families in town, while my father, Frank Williams, worked at the local sawmill, but only when he felt like it. But the most frightening thing in that house was his presence. The man I called father. Frank rarely spoke, but when he opened his mouth, it was usually to shout with rough hands and the smell of whiskey deeply soaked into his skin. Just one glance from him was enough to make anyone bow their head in silence. He was the type of man who made neighbors hold their breath when he passed by, a figure nobody dared to oppose. For as long as I can remember, he beat my mother, Helen. I saw it, I heard it, but I couldn't do anything because that's how things were. My mother said marriage was for better or worse, and for her, only the worst remained. I grew up too quickly. By age 9, I already knew how to prepare food, wash the floor, and take care of my little sister, Emily. When she was born, my mother was very weak, and I was the one who changed her first diapers, who rocked her through her first nights of crying. I promised myself no one would hurt my little sister, but I couldn't keep that promise. We lived in an old trailer home on the outskirts of town. It wasn't a brick house. It was one of those that would shake with any strong wind. Inside there were 3 rooms, the kitchen, my parents' bedroom, and the small room where Emily and I slept. My mother was a thin woman with a face marked by exhaustion, always wearing a plaid dress and old slippers. She rarely smiled, but when she did, it seemed like everything became a little less heavy. Emily was the opposite. Bright eyes, an easy laugh, always talking, constantly inventing stories about princesses and castles. I loved listening because in her imagination, we lived in a beautiful place. But as soon as the gate slammed and my father's heavy footsteps echoed, that world would crumble. We would become tense. His food had to be ready, his glass full. If he arrived drunk, he would only yell. If he was sober, it was even worse, because drunk he just cursed, but sober he hit, and we accepted it because what else could we do? I was 13 years old when I began to notice something strange. My sister, who used to sleep peacefully, started having nightmares. She would wake up in the middle of the night crying, and when I asked, she would just hug me and say she couldn't tell. At first, I thought it was fear of our father. After all, who wouldn't be afraid of him? But gradually, I began to realize it wasn't an ordinary fear. She started hiding when he arrived. If before she would run to play in the yard, Now she remained silent. If before she asked for Mom's lap, now she stayed quiet in a corner, curled up like an injured bird. Until one night, I woke up to a noise. Footsteps. My father never walked during the night. He always slept heavily, snoring loudly. But that night, he was up. I left the room on tiptoe. The hallway was dark, but the light in my parents' room was on. And that's when I saw it. My father kneeling beside the bed, my little sister curled up with wide eyes, my mother sitting in the corner with her arms around her own body, crying, but making no sound. It was a scene that never left my head. At that moment, I understood everything, and something inside me died that night. I held Emily in my arms until she fell asleep, but I didn't sleep. I stayed awake, listening to the sounds of the house, feeling the presence of the cruel man on the other side of the wall, and decided we couldn't stay there anymore. But how to escape? Where to go? How to convince my mother, who no longer had the strength for anything? In the following days, I was alert. I saw how my mother averted her eyes whenever my father touched Emily, how she clenched her hands when he called my sister over. She knew. She always knew, and yet she stayed. One night, after Emily fell asleep, I went to the kitchen and stood beside my mother while she washed the dishes. "We need to leave," I said. She stopped, staring at the plate in the sink without saying anything. "Mom, you know what he does." She closed her eyes. "I can't." "Where would we go?" "Anywhere is better than here." She was silent, and then finally looked at me. And there, for the first time in my life, I saw my mother afraid. Not afraid of him, but afraid of finally doing something, afraid of changing our destiny. That night, without him noticing, we began planning our escape. The things that destroy us from within aren't always loud. Sometimes they happen in absolute silence, and silence can be deafening. Since that night, something changed in me. I already knew my life would never be like other girls, but seeing my sister in that situation was like feeling a fist squeezing my chest all the time. Emily was my responsibility. I couldn't protect her before, but I wouldn't fail again. My sister had always been a ray of sunshine. She was one of those children who could turn anything into play. Even the hardest days seemed less heavy when she made up stories with the old dolls we had, or when we went out to pick apples in the yard. But after that night, Emily changed. She stopped playing, stopped talking much, or laughing. Her silence gave me chills. If before she ran outside as soon as the sun rose, now she stayed inside, hiding in any corner that seemed safe. If before she hugged me all the time, now she avoided contact. And when he was nearby, she hunched her shoulders and made herself smaller than she already was, as if she wanted to disappear. My mother saw it. I know she did. In the following days, I noticed how her eyes followed Emily around the house, how she wrung her hands on her apron whenever my father called my sister over, how her eyes shimmered with tears that never fell. She knew, but she pretended not to see. I wanted to scream at her, wanted to ask why she didn't do anything, wanted to understand how she could allow something like this to happen under her own roof. But at the same time, I knew the answer. She was afraid too. My father had always been cruel, but with my mother, it was even worse. When he hit her, it wasn't just a slap. It was with force, with rage, with hatred. I had seen my mother spend days unable to get out of bed. I had seen the purple bruises she tried to hide under the sleeves of her dress. I had heard the muffled sobs during the night. My mother was a prisoner too, and worst of all, he knew no one would stand against him. I still tried to make Emily play, tried to tell her stories the way she used to for me. But one day, while I was arranging the dolls on the floor and calling her to sit with me, she simply looked at me and said, "I don't want to play anymore." That was like a punch to the stomach. "Why? You always liked to play." She shook her head. "I'm not a child anymore." Emily was only 8 years old, 8 years old, and that human monster had already stolen everything from her. I felt a lump in my throat, but I couldn't cry. Not in front of her. If I fell apart, who would hold us together? "You're still a child, Emily. You can still play." She just shrugged, and at that moment, I realized that if I didn't do something, my sister would disappear from the inside out. That night, I sat on the edge of the bed and watched Emily sleep. She moved constantly, mumbling senseless things, having nightmares almost every night. But suddenly, I saw she started crying in her sleep. The tears ran down her face. Her lips trembled. That was too much for me. I held her hand and did the only thing that I could do. I promised we would get out of there. "I'll save you, Emily. I swear." Even in her sleep, she squeezed my hand, and at that moment, I knew I couldn't wait any longer. From then on, my mother and I would need to do something. We needed to escape before it was too late. The next day, I waited for my father to leave for work and went to the kitchen where my mother was washing dishes. "Mom, we have to leave." She froze, keeping her back to me, scrubbing a plate that had been clean for a long time. "Where to, child? We have no one, nowhere to go." "Anywhere is better than here." She continued scrubbing the plate, then placed it in the sink and let out a long sigh. Then, quietly, she said something I'll never forget. "He'll kill us." I froze. My mother wasn't wrong. My father wasn't the type of man who let things escape. If we tried to run and he found out, what would he do? I didn't know, but I knew staying was worse. "We need to try. If we don't go now, we won't make it." My mother turned to me, her swollen eyes, her face marked by time and suffering, and she held my face with trembling hands. "Are you sure?" I nodded, and that's when we started planning our escape. I want to pause for a moment. If you feel the love and are still listening to my story, please subscribe and hit the like button on the Grandparents Memories channel to show your support. Thank you so much. I knew my father was a bad man. I knew it since I was little, since the first times I saw my mother cower when he raised his voice, since the first slaps he gave me just because I was in his way. But what he did to Emily, that was worse than anything in that house. Fear was a constant presence. It was in every corner, in every avoided glance, in every breath held when we heard the door opening in the late afternoon. Because the worst moment of the day was when my father returned from the sawmill. That's when we had to measure every movement, every word. Any wrong thing was reason for him to get irritated, and when he got irritated, someone paid for it. I learned quickly to become invisible. I learned to clean the house the way he liked, to put the food on the table without looking him in the eye, to never talk back. But Emily was still too young, and no matter how hard she tried, she didn't know how to disappear. In the early years, my father didn't pay much attention to her. But then, when she started to grow, something changed. I saw it in his eyes, saw it in the way he looked at her, how he called her name in a different tone, how he insisted she sit near him at dinner time. My mother saw it too, and I saw my mother seeing it, and we never said anything. But Emily began to change. She never wanted to sleep in our room anymore. She always found a way to end up in the middle of our mother's bed, hugging her as if that would prevent something. And every time this happened, the next day my father would be more furious. He would throw plates against the wall, yell at my mother, say we were spoiling the girl. One night, Emily woke up screaming. I was startled, tried to shake her, but she was panicking. She cried, thrashed around. In the middle of crying, she hugged me so tight I could barely breathe. Don't let him take me. Don't let him. I froze. I tried to calm her, but I knew what it meant, and I knew right then that if we didn't leave that house, my sister wouldn't survive. Fear consumed me, but one thing kept me standing. I had to be strong. But what did it mean to be strong in a situation like this? Because we couldn't simply walk out the door and run away. We had no one, no money, nowhere to go. My father controlled everything, every penny that came into that house, every step my mother took. So we began to plan. It was my mother who had the idea to save a little money from the cleaning she did for neighbors. It wasn't much, a few coins per week that she hid inside a hole in the mattress. I also started collecting, taking the change I found in the pockets of my father's pants when I washed his clothes. It was a dangerous plan. If he discovered, we were lost, but we had no choice. The problem was that he was becoming more attentive, and one day everything fell apart. It happened on a Sunday. My father always drank more on Sundays, spending the entire day sprawled in the yard chair, grumbling. But that night, he was quieter than normal, sitting at the table, twirling his fork in his hand, looking at my mother in a way that made me freeze. "You're different," he said suddenly. My mother didn't respond. He hit the fork on the table. "Yes, you're different. You're acting strange, you and that old girl there." He looked at me. I swallowed hard. "What are you two planning, huh?" My mother tried to laugh, tried to pretend it was nothing, but I knew he was already suspicious. I knew the danger was getting closer. And that same night, Emily disappeared. I woke up in the middle of the night and saw she wasn't in bed. My heart raced. I jumped up, ran to the living room. Nothing. My parents' bedroom door was closed. I stopped in front of the door, holding my breath, feeling my whole body tremble, but I didn't have the courage to enter. The next day, Emily returned to speaking less than before, returned to avoiding looking in our eyes, but mainly she returned with a silence that destroyed me inside. It was on that day that my mother decided we would leave. It didn't matter how. It didn't matter what happened afterward. We just needed to get out of there before it was too late. I had never seen my mother so determined. I had never seen so much fear in her eyes, and I knew that if we had one more night there, we would never leave. The escape had to happen now. That morning, my mother didn't say a word, just looked at me differently, as if she wanted to engrave my image before the day ended. Her face was pale, her eyes swollen from a sleepless night. I knew she was afraid. I was too, but we had no choice. Emily woke up silent as always. Her skin seemed even paler than normal, and she didn't even try to eat her toast and eggs, just sat hunched in the chair, holding her own hands as if she needed to hold onto something to keep from falling apart. My father was different. He got up late, quieter than normal, his eyes even heavier than usual. I watched him from the corner of my eye, trying to understand if he had noticed something, if he knew what we were planning. My mother pretended, trying to act as if nothing was happening, but it was hard to fool a man who had spent his entire life finding reasons to punish us. He left for work later than normal, pausing at the door for a few seconds before crossing the yard and disappearing down the dirt road. We stayed there, not breathing, waiting for the sound of footsteps to fade. And then my mother turned to me. "It's today." My heart stopped for a second. It was no longer a plan, an idea in the back of our heads. Now it was real. We had little time. My mother pulled the mattress from its place and took the few bills we had gathered over the months. It was almost nothing, but it was all we had. I ran to the room, grabbed our warmest clothes, a piece of bread, and a bottle of water. Emily didn't ask anything, just did what we asked, as if she were in another world. My mother went out to get a bundle of clothes she had left at the neighbor's house, Mrs. Jenkins. She was the only person on the street who sometimes looked at us with pity, but never interfered. When my mother returned, the sun was already starting to set, and that's when we realized the worst. My father hadn't gone to work that day. He was sitting on the porch, his eyes fixed on the road, a cigarette between his fingers. He hadn't gone to the bar, hadn't gone out to play. He stayed there, waiting. My mother froze. I saw when her hands began to tremble, when her eyes filled with despair. He knew. I don't know how, if he heard something, if he noticed the change in our behavior, but he knew. And now we were trapped there with him. Night fell slowly, bringing with it a suffocating weight. My mother tried to act normally, but her hands were cold. Emily trembled without saying a word. I felt my entire body pulsing with fear. My father ate dinner without saying anything, but when he finished, he left the cutlery on the table with force and looked at my mother. "We're going to bed early tonight." He never said that. My stomach twisted. My mother nodded, but I saw her face lose all color. She knew what it meant. He was going to lock the door, make sure we didn't leave, and when the light went out, Emily wouldn't be safe. My mother looked at me, and at that instant, we both understood. We couldn't wait. We couldn't let the night come. I held Emily's hand and felt her pulse racing. My mother got up slowly, going to the stove as if she were just going to heat some water. My father was sitting in the chair, drinking a glass of bourbon, observing each of our movements. Then my mother did something I had never seen before. She dropped the kettle on the floor. The noise was loud. The hot water splashed everywhere. My father got up furious, cursing. It was at that moment that my mother looked at me. "Run!" I pulled Emily by the hand, and we rushed out the kitchen door. The cold air hit my face, and the sound of my father's voice came after us like thunder. We ran without looking back. The yard seemed endless. The dirt road seemed slippery. Emily stumbled, almost fell, but I held her and kept running. We heard a noise, my father shouting, the door slamming hard, my mother screaming back. My heart raced. He was going to catch her. He was going to kill her. But then his voice grew more distant. My mother stayed behind so I could escape with Emily. I knew I couldn't go back, couldn't hesitate. I knew that my mother had stayed behind, that perhaps I would never see her again, But above all, I cried because for the first time in years, I knew he would never touch my sister again, and that was all that mattered. The cold of the night cut our skin like a blade. The wind raised the dust from the dirt road, and each step we took seemed like a fight against our own bodies. But I couldn't stop, couldn't let go of Emily's hand, couldn't look back. Fear pushed us forward, as if my father were right behind, ready to drag us back to that hell. Emily breathed with difficulty, sobbing between steps. I knew she was at her limit, but what could I do? We couldn't simply stop and rest. I looked around, trying to recognize something on the dark road. We couldn't go back home. We had nowhere to go. So we kept running. The town was far, but I knew the way. Over the years, when my mother sent me to get medicine at the pharmacy or buy bread at the small market, I paid attention. I knew where the first houses began, where the sheriff's office was, where the streets turned into sidewalks. But everything seemed so distant now. The silence of the night was broken only by the sound of our footsteps and our labored breathing. Occasionally, a dog barked in the distance, and my heart would race, thinking someone might hear us. Emily began to stumble. "Just a little more," I whispered, squeezing her hand. "We need to continue." She didn't respond, just followed me, blind with fear and exhaustion. I didn't know what would happen when we reached town, didn't know if anyone would help us, if we would find my mother. I didn't know anything. I just knew we couldn't stop. Time passed slowly, and each meter traveled seemed like an eternity, until finally I spotted the first lights of the town. My heart accelerated, but then came the second problem. Where to go? We couldn't simply sit on the sidewalk and wait for the sun to rise. We needed a safe place. My eyes scanned the deserted street. The doors of the houses were closed, the windows dark, no one around. Then I remembered Mrs. Jenkins. She was our neighbor, but she had a sister who lived in town. Once, when I went with my mother to deliver some washed clothes, I heard her comment that her sister lived in a little house near the church. It was our only option. I squeezed Emily's hand and followed the street, trying to remember the way. My heart was beating hard. Fear still pulsed in my chest. At any moment, I thought I would hear my father's footsteps behind us, that he would emerge from the shadows and drag us back. But that didn't happen. The streets were empty, and the town slept. After a few minutes, I spotted the small church at the top of the hill, and beside it, the simple little house with a small yard. That was it. I approached the gate and looked at the house. No lights on. I knocked on the door with a trembling hands. No response. I knocked again, this time harder. After a few seconds, a faint light came on inside. The sound of footsteps came to the door. It opened a crack. It was a thin lady with her hair tied in a low bun and a suspicious look. "Who is it?" I swallowed hard. "We need help." She looked at me for a few seconds, analyzing my face, my state. Emily huddled behind me. Then she opened the door a little more. "Who sent you?" "Mrs. Jenkins," I said quickly. "She's our neighbor." She narrowed her eyes, trying to understand if I was telling the truth, and then finally opened the door. "Come in." My knees almost gave way. I pulled Emily inside, and as soon as we passed through the door, I felt like I could finally breathe. But the fear hadn't ended yet. The lady made us sit at the kitchen table and looked at us more carefully. Tell me what happened. I knew I couldn't tell everything. If she knew, maybe she would be afraid to shelter us. Our father beats us, was all I could say, feeling a lump in my throat. And we ran away. My mother was supposed to meet us, but my voice failed. Her face softened a little. Do you have somewhere to go? I shook my head. She was silent for a moment, as if weighing the consequences, then let out a long sigh. You can stay here tonight. Tomorrow we'll see what to do. I wanted to cry, wanted to thank her on my knees, but I could only hold Emily's hand and whisper, We're safe now. She looked at me, still with fear in her eyes, but for the first time in a long time, there was also a glimmer of hope. Nancy Jenkins' kitchen smelled of fresh black coffee and old wood. The wall clock made a rhythmic noise, a slow tick-tock that filled the silence. Emily and I sat side by side, still breathing deeply, trying to understand where we were. The night seemed darker inside, as if all the fear still accompanied us. With every small noise outside, my heart raced. I knew my father wouldn't give up easily. He wasn't the type of man who let things escape. Nancy placed a cup of black coffee in front of me and hot chocolate for Emily. The liquid was steaming, but I didn't even think before holding the cup with both hands, as if that warmth could drive away the cold that seemed to have settled deep inside me. You can sleep in the small back room, she said, her voice firm, but without hostility. I nodded, not daring to look her in the eyes too much. And your mother? She asked. Where is she? I wished I had an answer. My mother stayed behind. My mother might be dead now. My mother might have been beaten so badly she could never escape again. But I didn't say any of that. I just gripped the edge of the cup and whispered, She'll come. Nancy didn't say anything for a moment. Her gaze weighed on me, analyzing, trying to understand. Take a bath before lying down. You look like you've run a marathon. I want to pause for a moment. If you feel the love and are still listening to my story, please subscribe and hit the like button on the Grandparents' Memories channel to show your support. Thank you so much. I didn't know how to respond. We did look like we had run to save our lives. I took Emily to the bathroom, and for the first time in days, I saw my sister relax a little when she felt the hot water on her skin. She scrubbed herself slowly, as if trying to remove something that couldn't be seen. I wanted to say something to ease that weight, wanted to say everything would be all right, but how could I promise that when I didn't even know what would happen? After the bath, we returned to the kitchen, where Nancy had already prepared 2 mattresses in the small back room. The bed was wooden and creaked, but it seemed luxurious compared to the hard floor where we slept at home. Emily lay down first, her eyes still laden with fear. Will Mom find us? She asked quietly. I felt a knot tighten in my throat. Yes, I lied. She squeezed my hand and closed her eyes. I, on the other hand, didn't sleep. I stayed awake listening to every sound of the night, every branch that cracked outside. Every headlight that passed by the street made my heart race. What if he discovered where we were? What if he knocked on the door in the middle of the night? What if he came to take us back? The idea made me sit up in bed and press my knees against my chest. I wanted my mother to be there. I wanted her to appear at the door with her messy hair and that same look. But the truth was, she could be dead now. I closed my eyes and forced myself to breathe slowly. That night, I made a silent prayer. It wasn't an ordinary prayer. I didn't ask for happiness or luck or future. I asked only that my mother be alive, that she find a way to escape that hell, and that somehow we would meet again. Sleep came slowly, laden with exhaustion and fear, and in the middle of the night I dreamed of my mother. In the dream, she ran as I had run, and in the background my father shouted. The sun hadn't risen yet when I woke up. My body was heavy. My muscles ached as if I had been beaten. The mattress was soft, but my head felt full of stones. The first thing I did was look to the side. Emily was still sleeping, her features serene, but her fists closed against her chest, as if trying to protect herself, even in sleep. I sighed deeply, trying to understand where I was. Then I remembered we had escaped. My mother stayed behind, and I didn't know what would happen now. The back room where we were was small, with a wooden window slightly ajar. The cold wind came in, raising goosebumps on my skin. Outside, the first sounds of the town began to emerge. A dog barking, a cart passing, the distant whistle of some man going to work. I pulled the blanket over Emily and got up slowly. My legs were still shaking from the run the night before. I left the room silently, trying not to make noise. Nancy was already awake. She was in the kitchen, dressed in a simple plaid dress, her hair tied in a low bun, straining the coffee. The bitter smell filled the air. She looked at me without saying anything for a few seconds, then pulled out a cup and poured the coffee, placing it on the table. "Sit," I obeyed. My fingers wrapped around the cup, trying to absorb that heat. Nancy pulled up a chair and sat across from me. "What do you plan to do now, girl?" The question caught me by surprise. What did I plan to do? I didn't know. My only idea was to run away. I hadn't thought about the after. I looked at the floor, squeezing the cup. Wait for my mother. Nancy kept looking at me, and I felt my face burn. And if she doesn't come? I swallowed hard. That was the question I had been avoiding. What if my mother was dead? What if she never managed to escape? My throat closed, and tears threatened to rise, but I couldn't cry. Not in front of Nancy. She sighed and took a sip of her own coffee. "You can't stay here?" Those words hit like a punch to the stomach. I knew it, of course I knew, but hearing it out loud made everything seem even worse. "I have nowhere to go," I murmured. Nancy didn't respond immediately, just sat there analyzing me. Then, as if making a decision, she said, "There's St. Mary's Shelter here in town. The sisters take in girls who need help." I frowned. "A shelter? They can help you. They can provide a roof, a plate of food, until you find your mother." She didn't want to say it, but we both knew my mother might never find us. I pressed my fingers against the coffee cup, feeling the heat on my skin, trying to hold on to something that wasn't fear. "I'll take you after lunch," she said, getting up and starting to arrange the kitchen. I continued sitting, not knowing what to feel. It wasn't a home, but it was a safe place, and after everything, maybe it was the best we could have. I went back to the room, sat on the edge of the mattress, and watched Emily sleep. Was my mother still alive? Did she know we managed to escape, or did he stop her? I squeezed my eyes, driving away the bad thoughts. I needed to be strong for me, for Emily, and especially for my mother. The day passed slowly. After so many sleepless nights, so much tension and fear, my body begged for rest. but my head wouldn't allow it. Every noise in the street made me jump. Every shadow at the window made me think my father was there, ready to drag us back. Emily also seemed restless. Even when she tried to play with an old doll Nancy had lent her, her gaze was empty, distant, as if even there, safe, she was still trapped in some dark place inside her. Nancy wasn't a woman of many words, but I observed how from time to time she looked at us askance, as if trying to decide if she was doing the right thing by helping us. Time dragged on until the sun reached the highest point in the sky. That's when she finally broke the silence. "It's time to go." I knew we couldn't stay there forever, but still, hearing those words made my chest tighten. I looked at Emily, who was holding the doll between her thin fingers. She didn't look at me, just pressed her lips and nodded slowly. Nancy took a scarf from inside the cabinet and tied it around her head before turning to us. "Come." I got up slowly and held Emily's hand. She squeezed mine hard, as if to say she was there, that she was still with me. We went out into the street, and I felt the hot sun hit my face, bringing a light that seemed too cruel for the weight we carried. The town was awake now, different from the night before when we passed unnoticed through the shadows. Men pushed carts full of fruit, women talked from door to door, children ran barefoot, raising dust from the beaten earth floor. Everything seemed so normal, as if our nightmare had never existed, but it had, and I knew that even from a distance, he could still reach us. The path to St. Mary's shelter was short but seemed like an eternity. Each step made me feel like I was moving even further away from my mother, and that gave me a knot in my stomach. When we finally arrived, my chest tightened. The shelter was a simple construction with high white walls and an iron gate that creaked when Nancy pushed it. The smell of flowers came from a well-tended garden in the middle of the courtyard. Everything was so quiet that it seemed like another world, far from the dirty and noisy reality of the streets. 2 nuns walked on the other side of the courtyard, and one of them saw us first. She was an older woman with deep eyes and a face that carried many stories. When she approached, she didn't smile, just looked at us, analyzing every detail of our presence there. "Who are these girls?" Her voice was soft but had authority. Nancy took a deep breath before answering. "They're daughters of a woman who was beaten by her husband. They did what they could to escape." The nun was silent for a few moments, then lowered her eyes to Emily, who squeezed my hand even tighter and hid behind me. That's when I saw her look change. She didn't ask questions, didn't ask for explanations, just nodded. "You need food." I nodded slowly. She gestured for us to enter, and it was only when we passed through the gate that I realized how exhausted I was. My body seemed made of lead, and the weight I carried on my shoulders seemed to have doubled. We followed the nun to a small refectory where some girls dressed in simple clothes washed dishes and swept the floor. The smell of chicken soup filled the air. She pulled out a chair for us and signaled for us to sit down. "Stay here. I'm going to get something for you to eat." Emily didn't let go of my hand for even a second. I looked around and saw that some of the girls were watching us curiously, but none approached. It was a new world, a world we didn't know if it would be our home. When the nun returned, she placed 2 deep plates in front of us. The soup was still steaming, and the smell of vegetables made my stomach growl. "Eat," she said. Emily took the spoon first. The first spoonful made her eyes fill with water. Maybe it was because it had been days since we had eaten properly, or maybe it was because for the first time in a long time, we had food without fear that someone would snatch the plate from our hands. I held the spoon with trembling fingers and brought the soup to my mouth. It was simple, but it was hot, and it was ours. Nancy stood beside us for a while, watching us. When Emily finished the second spoonful, she let out a sigh and turned to the nun. "They have nowhere to go." The nun just nodded, and at that moment I knew our new life would begin there. But deep down, one question still hammered inside me. Where was my mother? Had she managed to escape, or had we lost her forever? The days inside St. Mary's shelter passed slowly. The silence was almost sacred, broken only by the sound of brooms sweeping dust from the stones, by the nuns singing during prayers, and by the tinkling of spoons on plates during meals. For some girls, that place was a home. For others, it was a temporary refuge, a place where they hid from the world until they could start over somewhere else. For Emily and me, it was a pause. But a pause wasn't the same as safety. From the first moment we sat in that refectory, a single question tormented me. Where was my mother? At first, I tried to believe she would soon find us, that somehow she would manage to escape and look for us there. But days passed, then a week, then 2, and nothing. The nuns gave us clothes, taught us to pray before meals, and gave us a corner to sleep, but none of that filled the emptiness in my chest. I would wake up in the middle of the night, my eyes lost on the dark ceiling and trying to imagine what had happened that night when we fled. Had my father hurt her? Had he locked her inside the house so she could never leave again? Was she alive? I tried not to cry in front of Emily, but some nights I couldn't help it. In the shelter, I was just another girl. There was no past there. The nuns called us children of God and gave us daily tasks to keep our minds occupied. We helped in the kitchen, in the garden, in the refectory. It was a simple routine, but I didn't want routine. I wanted my mother. One afternoon, while helping fold sheets in the courtyard, I heard the sound of hurried footsteps. I raised my head and saw Nancy talking with one of the nuns near the iron gate. My heart raced. I placed the sheets carelessly on the table and ran over there, feeling my stomach turn. "Any news?" I asked, my voice more anxious than it should be. Nancy looked at me with a mixture of pity and concern. "The town is talking," she said, lowering her tone of voice. "Your father is looking for you." My skin crawled all over. "What do you mean?" She sighed as if weighing her words before telling me. "He's asking around the neighborhood. Says his wife disappeared, and his daughters are lost out there. But no one says anything. Everyone pretends they don't know." I felt a bitter taste in my mouth. "And my mother?" She hesitated, and that was worse than any answer. "I don't know, girl. No one has seen her." My chest sank. The nun beside Nancy looked at me with a serious expression. "You're safe here. He won't find you." I wanted to believe those words, but nothing seemed safe. That night I couldn't sleep. Every noise outside seemed to be my father arriving. Every distant voice seemed to be the announcement of the worst. I couldn't wait. I couldn't stay there without knowing what had happened to my mother. So I made a decision. I would go back. Not home, but nearby. I needed to know. I needed to see with my own eyes if my mother was still alive. But to do that, I would have to leave without anyone noticing, and I knew this could be the most dangerous decision of my life. The decision to go back had been eating me from inside since the first night at the shelter. I knew I couldn't stay there without knowing what had happened to my mother. But between wanting and doing was an abyss, a fear so great it made me tremble just thinking about it. If my father was still in town, if he was still looking for us, the risk was enormous. If he found me, I knew what would happen, but what was killing me inside was the uncertainty. Was my mother alive? Had he locked her inside the house? Had she managed to escape? No one said anything. The nuns prayed for God to give us strength, but the silence about my mother was like a scream inside my head. I needed to go, but I couldn't take Emily. If something happened to me, at least she would still be safe. I had already seen what my father was capable of doing to a defenseless child. I would never let him hurt her again. So, in the middle of the night, when the shelter lights were already off, and the only sound was the distant singing of some cricket hidden in the garden, I got up slowly from the bed. Emily was sleeping deeply beside me, clutching the pillow as if it were a shield. I looked at her for a while, memorizing every detail of her childish face, and then got up with all the care in the world. My heart was beating so loudly I was sure someone would hear it. I left the room without making noise, walking through the dark corridor, feeling my cold feet on the stone floor. The shelter was silent. The nuns slept in their quarters, and the only candle lit flickered in the chapel next to the courtyard. I approached the gate slowly, each step a test for my own fear. And then, at the moment I touched my hands to the cold iron of the gate, a voice sounded behind me. "Where do you think you're going, girl?" My entire body froze slowly. I turned and saw Sister Margaret, with her deep eyes and dark veil, giving me a firm look. My heart seemed about to explode. "I need to see my mother." My voice came out low, almost pleading. She analyzed me for a moment that seemed like an eternity. Then she sighed. "Do you want to die?" I want to pause for a moment. If you feel the love and are still listening to my story, please subscribe and hit the like button on the Grandparents Memories channel to show your support. Thank you so much. I felt my stomach sink. I didn't want to die, but what was continuing to live without knowing about my mother? I didn't answer, just held the gate with more force, as if I could convince myself I was doing the right thing. The nun took a step forward, her eyes still fixed on me. "You know he's still out there, don't you?" I nodded slowly. She sighed again, crossing her arms over her black habit. "Then go. But if he catches you, don't say we didn't warn you." Shock ran through my body. She was letting me go. I didn't ask twice. I pushed the gate slowly and went out into the deserted street, feeling the cold of the dawn swallow me whole. The streets were empty, and each shadow seemed like a lurking figure. My heart hammered against my chest, but my legs moved on their own. I knew the way. The town was small, and our house was beyond the market, after the square, at the beginning of the dirt road. I passed by the closed houses, feeling the smell of dawn moisture mixed with the distant odor of firewood smoke. The closer I got, the more terror infiltrated every cell of my body. What if I found him first? What if he already knew where I was? What if my mother? I shook my head, driving away the bad thoughts. I needed to go all the way. The sky was beginning to clear when I finally saw our house, or what remained of it. The fence was down, the door open, one of the windows broken. I stopped in the middle of the road, feeling the dread consume me. What happened here? My chest rose and fell in quick, desperate braids. I took one step, then another. When I crossed the yard, I realized the house was empty. The floor was covered with glass shards, the furniture overturned, a smell of alcohol and mold permeating the air. My mother wasn't there, and neither was my father. My body trembled. Where were they? What had he done to her? I approached the bed where my mother used to sleep and saw something that made me lose my breath. A piece of plaid fabric stuck in a nail on the wall. I knew that fabric. It was from the dress my mother wore the night we fled. My throat tightened. She had been here. She had tried to escape, and something had gone wrong. I heard a noise, footsteps on the road. My heart raced. The only thing I did was huddle in the corner of the room, trying to hide, trying to disappear. The footsteps approached, and then a low voice, almost a whisper. Daughter? My eyes filled with tears before I even turned my face. My mother was there, hurt but alive. My mother was there, but she wasn't the same. Her bare feet were dirty with earth, her dress torn in some places, her hair disheveled as if she had run for days without rest. Her face was thin, her skin pale, her eyes deep and full of a weariness that went beyond the physical. But what hurt most was the purple mark on her cheek. She stood frozen in the doorway, looking at me as if she didn't believe what she saw, as if I were a ghost. My lips trembled. Mom, was all I could say before falling into her arms. She held me against her chest, and it was only then, at that moment, that I felt the weight of everything that had happened. I had been running for days, carrying fear on my shoulders, trying to be strong for Emily, for me, for her. But now, in my mother's arms, all strength dissolved. I cried like a child who had spent too much time without comfort. I felt her hands hold my head, her thin, trembling fingers. I thought I had lost you. Her voice came out low, hoarse. She rested her face on my hair, and I realized she was crying too. I hugged my mother even tighter, afraid she would disappear. I looked for you, I murmured, sobbing. We waited, but you didn't show up. She breathed deeply, her fragile body trembling in my arms. I tried, daughter. I tried. I moved away a little to look at her. What happened? She bit her lips, her eyes shifting to the floor. She was silent for a time, as if gathering courage to speak. He caught me. My stomach turned over. After you ran away, he noticed. He went crazy, beat me, locked me in the room. He said he would go after you, that he would find you, even if it was in hell. She passed her fingers over her face, as if trying to erase the memories. I couldn't do anything. I was locked up for days without knowing about you, without knowing if you had managed to escape. How did you escape? My voice came out choked. She sighed, her eyes fixed on some point in the past. He drank more than usual and then passed out on the couch. I knew that was my only chance. She breathed deeply before continuing. I took the few things I could carry and went out through the window. My heart was beating fast. And is he still looking for us? Her words brought a cutting chill to my spine. He won't stop until he finds us. She looked me in the eyes, and I saw something there I had never seen before. Determination. My mother, that woman who had spent years cowering under my father's shouts, who lowered her head whenever he entered the house, now had fire in her eyes. But he will never hurt us again. It was the first time I heard my mother say something like that, and it was the first time I believed we could have a chance to really escape. She held my hands tightly. We need to find Emily. I nodded, but before we could take any step outside that house, we heard a noise. A long whistle. My blood froze. I knew that sound. It was him. My mother's eyes widened. We didn't think. We just ran. Through the yard, through the fallen fence, through the road. Fear burned our lungs, and the weight of our escape seemed even greater now. He was close, and if he found us, we knew there wouldn't be a second chance. Fear had a sound. It was the sound of our labored breathing, of bare feet hitting the dry earth of the road, of branches breaking under our desperate steps. But the worst sound was what came behind us, the long, drawn-out whistle cutting through the night like a blade. It was him, and he was close. My mother squeezed my hand so hard, her fingers dug into my skin. Her body trembled, but her legs didn't stop. She ran as if our lives depended on it, and they did. My heart was beating hard in my chest, in my neck, in my temples. Breathing burned in my lungs. Sweat ran down my forehead, mixing with the dust rising from the dry ground. My mother looked to the sides, trying to find a path, a hiding place, anything that would give us a chance. But we were on the open road. If he saw us, we would have nowhere to run. I could already feel his presence behind us, even without looking. The smell of bourbon, the weight beat of his shadow. He's hunting us, my mother murmured. We veered to the side, going through a trail in the midst of vegetation. The low bushes scratched us. Thorns from the shrubs cut our ankles, but none of that mattered. We needed to disappear. The noise of our footsteps was muffled by the woods. We heard only the rustling of leaves, crickets singing in the distance, the echo of our short and desperate breaths. And then, what we feared most, the sound of footsteps behind us, too heavy to be the wind. My mother stopped abruptly, pulling me behind a thick tree. She placed her hand over my mouth, stifling any sound I might make. I was trembling from head to toe. The smell of the woods mixed with our sweat made me nauseous, but I couldn't move. The night seemed to have stopped. The seconds dragged on as if they were hours. And then he spoke. I know you're here. My skin froze. His voice was low but laden with threat. No use running, woman. You think you can hide from me? My mother closed her eyes tightly. Her lips pressed until they turned white. He was so close we could hear him breathe. I gave you everything. I gave you a house, food, my doctors. I felt a tight knot in my throat. He didn't see anything wrong. He didn't see the monster he was. His voice became harder. I just want what's mine. My mother trembled beside me. The hatred on her face was evident, but we knew we couldn't face him. If he found us, everything would end there. The forest was dark, and he walked slowly, as if savoring the hunt. The sound of his footsteps came and went, as if he were near, but at the same time far. My mother pressed my shoulder. "Run!" My head turned to her, eyes wide. "What?" "Now." She pushed me to the other side of the trail, and before I could react, she went out in the opposite direction, breaking branches on purpose, creating a diversion. Fear pierced me like a sharp knife. No. But my mother didn't stop. She ran out among the bushes, making noise, drawing his attention away from me. I wanted to follow her, but I knew if I did, I would ruin everything. He ran after her, and the sound of his heavy footsteps moved away. I stayed there, huddled behind the tree, with my heart racing, my eyes blind with tears. My mother had saved me, but what if he caught her? Despair grew inside me. I needed to get out of there, needed to find Emily, needed to believe my mother would manage to escape. So I ran, this time alone, without looking back, without knowing if my mother would escape him, but with one certainty: he would never catch me again. The wind cut my skin as I ran. The tears mixed with sweat, and my vision oscillated between the darkness of the night and the flashes of my panicked mind. My body wanted to stop, but fear wouldn't let it. Each step was a battle against the hard ground, against the exhaustion that screamed in my muscles, against the terror of knowing my mother was still back there, alone. I didn't know if she had managed to lose him. I didn't know if she was still alive. But I couldn't think about that now. Emily. I needed to get to her. The road seemed endless, and each shadow around me transformed into a threatening figure. My breathing came short, ragged, and my chest burned as if it were on fire. The town wasn't so far, but that night it seemed I would never arrive. Then, finally, I saw the first houses, the dark windows, the empty streets, the weak lampposts illuminating only small pieces of the sidewalk. I had no time to lose. My bare feet made a dull sound on the stone floor as I ran through the alleys. Each corner turned was a risk. What if he had friends in town? What if someone had seen him and told him I was there? But I had no choice. The shelter was just a few blocks away now. I felt my heart hammering against my ribs. The gates of St. Mary's shelter appeared before me, tall and closed as always. I stopped, breathing with difficulty, and knocked hard, not caring who I would wake. "Open, please!" The wood echoed the sound of my desperate fists. Nothing. I knocked again, feeling despair grow. "For the love of God, someone open up!" The seconds seemed to drag on. Then a creak. The gate opened just a crack, and a face covered by a dark veil appeared. The nun looked at me first with surprise, then with concern. "What are you doing here?" "My mother, he's after her. I need to get in." She opened the gate completely and pulled me inside, closing it hurriedly right after. "Where's your mother?" "Out there." My voice broke. "She stayed behind to save me." My vision blurred, and before I could say anything else, I felt my body give way. Exhaustion overcame fear. All my strength drained, and for the first time since I fled that house, I fainted. I woke up feeling a rough sheet on me and a smell of hot tea in the air. My head was throbbing, and for a moment I didn't know where I was. Then the memory came back like a punch. My eyes opened suddenly, and I sat up in bed with an abrupt movement. Sister Margaret was sitting in a chair beside me with a serene but attentive look. "You need to rest." "My mother." My voice came out weak, almost a whisper. We still don't have news. The world spun, and I felt despair rise up my throat. My mother was still out there. I needed to do something. Emily? My sister? The nun pointed to the corner of the room. I looked to the side and saw Emily huddled in a blanket, sleeping. My breathing faltered. I got up slowly and approached her, feeling my legs trembling. Emily was there. Safe, I knelt beside her and held her small, warm hand. She moved a little and opened her eyes slowly, and when she saw me, her lip trembled. You came back. My eyes filled with tears. I came back. My flower. She threw herself into my arms, squeezing as if she never wanted to let go. And at that moment, only at that moment, did I allow myself to believe that maybe we had a chance. Maybe there was still hope. But the question that haunted me wouldn't go away. Where was my mother? And would we ever see her again? Time at the shelter passed differently after that night. The weight became an unbearable weight. Each morning was a torment. Each night, a cold and cruel emptiness. Emily was safe. Yes, but my mother was still out there. I tried to occupy myself with the tasks the nuns gave us. I washed clothes until my fingers were wrinkled, swept the corridors until my arm hurt, helped in the kitchen, even without being hungry. But nothing worked. My thoughts returned to the same question, the same fear that ate me from inside. Was she alive? I was afraid to ask, afraid to hear the answer. The town was small, and any news spread quickly. But for some reason, no one talked about her. Nancy was the only one who tried to get some information. "Nothing, girl," she said one day, sitting in the shelter's kitchen, drinking strong black coffee while looking at me with the pity. "No one has seen or heard anything. But what about my father?" She sighed. "He's still asking around, but he seems quieter now." That left me frozen. What would make my father give up looking for us? What would have happened for him to finally stop? I didn't want to think about the answer. Emily was my shadow, following me to every corner of the shelter, grabbing my skirt whenever a nun passed nearby. She spoke little, but I knew what was going on in her little head. She was waiting too, waiting for our mother to return. But days turned into weeks, and nothing. Until one morning, while we were scrubbing the refectory cloths in the courtyard basin, one of the nuns appeared at the door with a different face. "Come with me," she said, looking at me. My stomach turned. I dropped the soapy cloth in the water and followed the woman without saying anything, with Emily running behind me. I want to pause for a moment. If you feel the love and are still listening to my story, please subscribe and hit the like button on the Grandparents' Memories channel to show your support. Thank you so much. The nun took us to the entrance of the shelter, where Nancy was standing with her hands twisted over her apron, her face tense. My heart accelerated. "What happened?" She hesitated for an instant, and that was enough for my legs to go weak. "Your mother." Her voice faltered a bit, and I felt my breathing lock up. "She's alive," she said at last. The world around me stopped. I blinked a few times, trying to understand what those words meant. "Where is she?" Nancy lowered her eyes. "At County General Hospital." My chest sank. I didn't even ask what had happened. I knew. My father He wouldn't let her escape without marks. "I want to see her," I said, already moving. "I'll take you," said Nancy. "But prepare yourself." That phrase hit me like a silent warning. I took a deep breath, held Emily's hand, and left the shelter for the first time since I had returned. The path to the hospital was the longest of my life. Each beat of my heart seemed to echo on the dirt road, and my mind constructed the worst possible images. My mother was alive, but in what state? When we arrived, the smell of medicine and ether made me nauseous. The white walls seemed cold to me, as if inside the world was made only of sickness and goodbyes. A nurse guided us to a room in the back where the windows let in a timid light. And there she was, my mother, lying in bed, thinner than ever, her arms full of bruises, a cut on her forehead, still healing. She breathed slowly, her chest rising and falling with effort. My eyes filled with tears. "Mom?" She turned to me, and I saw a weak smile appear on her cracked lips. "My girl." I went to her without thinking, held her hand carefully, as if she would break at any moment. "What did he do to you?" My voice came out shaky. She let out a short sigh, her tired eyes. "He tried to kill me." My breathing failed, but he didn't succeed. She squeezed my hand with what little strength she had. "He didn't succeed, daughter." That phrase carried more than words. She was alive. She had won. I wanted to cry, wanted to scream, wanted to hug her tight, but all I did was hold her hand and nod. My mother would never be his prisoner again, and the three of us would never return to that hell. The monster would not imprison us again. Our freedom cost everything, but now it was ours. The hospital room was cold. The smell of medicine and disinfectant permeated the air, but nothing was stronger than the silent pain that hovered in there. My mother was lying down, fragile, hurt, but alive, and that should comfort me. But instead, fear still dominated me because my father was still out there. Because I knew that if he discovered my mother was alive, he would return. And we couldn't run forever. I sat beside the bed, holding her cold hand in mine. Her face was thin, her skin marked by bruises that denounced what she had faced to get there. "Does he know you're here?" My voice came out weak, as if I didn't want to hear the answer. My mother looked away. "I don't know." She breathed deeply before continuing. "But I don't think so." Nancy approached slowly, her arms crossed, her gaze laden with concern. "What happened that night, Helen?" My mother closed her eyes for a moment, as if reliving it was even worse than having gone through it all. "After they fled, he noticed right away. He went out of control." She swallowed hard, and I saw her hands tremble a little. "He wanted to make me tell where they were." I felt a tight knot in my chest. I knew what that meant. My mother suffered for our escape. "He beat me a lot, locked me in the room. He said he would find you, that Emily was his." My breathing faltered. "But then he drank too much, as always." Her eyes finally met mine, and it was then that I knew it was now or never. The silence in the room extended for a few seconds. I tried to escape through the window, but he woke up. Her voice failed. He caught me by the arm and threw me to the floor. My mother averted her eyes as if returning to that moment. He said that if I ran away, he wouldn't need me anymore, that he would take care of his daughters alone. I felt my stomach turn. She was saying, without needing the exact words, that he intended to destroy us too. I squeezed her hand harder, feeling the warmth of my body trying to reach hers. But I fought, she continued in a thread of voice. For the first time I fought. She breathed deeply and then looked at me. And that's how I managed to get the knife. The air left my lungs. Mom, she nodded slowly. He tried to stop me, but for the first time he was afraid of me. A shiver ran up my spine. You killed him? My mother looked at her own thin, fragile hands that had held a knife against her own tormentor. No, she shook her head, but I hurt him. Enough to escape. My breathing was uneven. He's still alive then? She nodded, and the weight of those words fell on me like a stone. My father was still out there, because I knew that if he discovered my mother was alive, he would return, and we couldn't run forever. I sat beside the bed, holding her cold hand in mine. Her face was thin, her skin marked by bruises that denounced what she had faced to get there. Does he know you're here? My voice came out weak, as if I didn't want to hear the answer. My mother looked away. I don't know. She breathed deeply before continuing. But I don't think so. Nancy approached slowly, her arms crossed, her gaze laden with concern. What happened that night, Helen? My mother closed her eyes for a moment, as if reliving it was even worse than having gone through it all. After they fled, he noticed right away. He went out of control. She swallowed hard, and I saw her hands tremble a little. He wanted to make me tell where they were. I felt a tight knot in my chest. I knew what that meant. My mother suffered for our escape. He beat me a lot, locked me in the room. He said he would find you, that Emily was his. My breathing faltered. But then he drank too much, as always. Her eyes finally met mine, and it was then that I knew it was now or never. The silence in the room extended for a few seconds. I tried to escape through the window, but he woke up. Her voice failed. He caught me by the arm and threw me to the floor. My mother averted her eyes, as if returning to that moment. He said that if I ran away, he wouldn't need me anymore, that he would take care of his daughters alone. I felt my stomach turn. She was saying, without needing the exact words, that he intended to destroy us too. I squeezed her hand harder, feeling the warmth of my body trying to reach hers. But I fought, she continued in a thread of voice. For the first time, I fought. She breathed deeply and then looked at me. And that's how I managed to get the knife. The air left my lungs. Mom, she nodded slowly. He tried to stop me, but for the first time he was afraid of me. A shiver ran up my spine. You killed him? My mother looked at her own thin, fragile hands that had held a knife against her own tormentor. No, she shook her head, but I hurt him enough to escape. My breathing was uneven. He's still alive then? She nodded, and the weight of those words fell on me like a stone. My father was still out there. My mother might have escaped, but he still existed, and monsters like him don't disappear so easily. The door of the room creaked slowly, and Emily entered hesitantly, as if afraid of what she would see. Her eyes widened when she saw my mother. "Mommy?" My mother smiled weakly, extending her arms with effort. "My little girl." Emily ran to the bed and threw herself against it, crying softly against our mother's chest. I held back my own tears, but inside I was already crumbling, and my mother was alive. Emily was safe. But we would never be truly free as long as he still breathed. Nancy cleared her throat and crossed her arms. "The question now is what we're going to do." What were we going to do? It was the first time I realized we still hadn't won. We had fled, survived, but we hadn't ended it yet. The fear still existed, and the only way to rid ourselves of it was to get rid of him once and for all. My mother looked at me, and at that instant, we both thought quite the same thing. If we wanted to live in peace, he would have to disappear first. Fear was a shadow that followed us for a long time. Even after the hospital, after seeing my mother alive and knowing Emily was safe, I still slept with my heart racing, still expected to hear the door being broken down in the middle of the night, still felt his eyes burning my skin even when I knew he wasn't nearby. But monsters don't disappear overnight. They leave marks, and what my father did to us would never completely disappear. My mother stayed in the hospital for a few more weeks. Her body was slow to recover, but I saw in her eyes that something deeper had changed. She would never again be the woman who once lowered her head, never again be the wife who accepted the destiny given to her. She had faced the monster, and even though he was still alive, he would never have the same power over us. Nancy helped us get temporary shelter in another town, a small place where no one knew our story, where we weren't the daughters who fled from a dangerous man, nor the woman who tried to kill her own husband. There, we were just survivors, but still, I knew the danger hadn't ended. I knew he could find us, and that's why one day, a few weeks after everything, my mother made a decision I never expected. She went to the sheriff's office. In the rural corners of Maine during the 1970s, women's voices were silenced as a matter of course. When a husband beat his wife, everyone looked away. It was considered family business, off limits to outsiders. But my mother broke that unwritten rule. She revealed everything, displaying her bruises, describing what he did to us, speaking openly about Emily, detailing how he treated us like possessions, and confessing how she nearly lost her life in an attempt to escape his violence. What astonished me most was that someone actually listened. The town sheriff wasn't known for his compassion. He asked no gentle questions and offered no comfort, but he knew my father's true nature, understood what kind of man he truly was, and for the first time in our lives, someone took action. They launched a search for him. They found him quickly. My father had remained in our hometown, still believing he owned everything and everyone around him, drinking at his usual bar, spreading lies about his ungrateful wife who had run off with his daughters. The possibility that anyone would come looking for him to hold him accountable never crossed his mind, and that was his downfall. We learned what happened several days later. They had captured him, placed him under arrest, and though I understood that justice was imperfect in those days, that men like him often escaped consequences, I knew with certainty that his power over us had been permanently broken. My father vanished from our lives, and for the first time, freedom felt tangible and real. Time moved forward. My mother found simple employment at the local diner. Emily gradually reclaimed her smile, her playfulness, her right to be just a normal little girl. And I discovered that fear doesn't disappear overnight, but I also learned it couldn't control me forever. Now in 2025, I become an elderly woman. My face bears wrinkles, and my hands show the marks of passing years. People know me as Martha Williams. They see me as a gentle grandmother who brews strong coffee and tells stories to her grandchildren. What they don't realize is that this tranquility was hard-won. I fought to be standing here today, fought to survive, and looking back across the decades, I'm certain of one thing: I never lived in fear again. Thank you all for patiently listening to me share my painful yet resilient memories. I hope that through this story, you can see the strength hidden within each of us. No matter how difficult life gets, we always have the power to choose a better future. Never lose hope, and always protect the ones you love. If you found this story meaningful, please hit the like button, and don't forget to subscribe to the Grandparents Memories channel to support people like me, those who wish to share their life stories. My heartfelt thanks to the founder of Grandparents Memories for creating such a wonderful space where I can express myself. See you again in the next stories on Grandparents Memories. Thank you and have a wonderful day. Don't forget to follow the channel so you won't miss any touching stories.